The scent of blood was the first thing Violet Allister noticed when she found him, a man more beast than human slumped against her barn door at dawn, clutching his side where a bullet had torn through flesh. His eyes, hard as flint, met hers with silent warning as she approached, medical bag in hand. It was the spring of 1877 in Winnetka, Wyoming territory, and Violet had no idea that the wounded stranger would soon become her husband, much less the subject of both the town's ridicule and eventual reverence. "Touch me with those delicate hands of yours, madam, and I might just forget my manners," the man growled, his voice rough as sand. Violet didn't flinch. At 26, she'd treated enough injuries as the town's unofficial nurse to recognize when a man's bark was worse than his bite. "Mister, you can forget whatever you like, but that wound needs tending or you'll be food for worms by sundown." The man's laugh came out as a pained wheeze. "Wouldn't be the worst ending I've earned." "I'm Violet Allister," she said, kneeling beside him despite his protest. "And you are?" A pause stretched between them as he considered whether to answer. "Isaiah Fletcher," he finally muttered, wincing as she peeled back his blood-soaked shirt. "Well, Mr. Fletcher, you've got a bullet that needs removing and a reputation that precedes you." His eyebrow arched. "That's so." "The Fletcher name isn't unknown in these parts. Your exploits with the Pinkertons have made their way even to our little corner of Wyoming." Violet worked methodically, cleaning around the wound. "Though I'd wager half the stories are tall tales." "And the other half?" Isaiah asked, his breath catching as she probed the wound. Violet met his gaze steadily. "Probably worse than the tales. That first encounter set the pattern for their unlikely relationship, her practical kindness meeting his hardened exterior." Isaiah Fletcher had indeed worked for the Pinkertons, but rumor had it he'd left under circumstances that made him unwelcome in most civilized company. Some whispered he'd killed men for less than a sideways glance. Others claimed he'd betrayed his own partners for bounty money. Whatever the truth, Isaiah carried darkness with him like a second shadow. Violet nursed him back to health over the following weeks, ignoring the warnings from concerned neighbors and friends. Her small homestead on the outskirts of Winnetka had been left to her after her parents' passing 3 years prior, and she maintained it with quiet determination, supplementing her income by tending to the sick when the town doctor was overwhelmed. "You know the town's talking," said Martha Kingsley, Violet's closest friend, as they walked through the general store one afternoon. "Sheriff Dawson himself came by asking about your guest." "Isaiah is recovering from a serious injury," Violet replied calmly, selecting a spool of thread. "That's not all he is, Violet," Martha whispered. "Thomas at the telegraph office says Fletcher is wanted in 3 territories, says he's killed more men than smallpox." Violet continued her shopping without comment, but that evening she confronted Isaiah as he sat on her porch, whittling a piece of wood. "Are you wanted by the law, Mr. Fletcher?" she asked without preamble. Isaiah's knife paused mid-stroke. In the weeks of his recovery, his beard had grown thicker, but it couldn't hide the scar that ran from his right temple to his jaw. "Would it matter if I was?" "It would matter if you brought danger to my door." He studied her for a long moment before answering. "I've done things I'm not proud of, Miss Allister, but I'm not running from the law, not anymore." "Then what are you running from?" The question hung in the air between them. Isaiah returned to his whittling. "Some ghosts don't need badges to haunt a man." As spring deepened into summer, Isaiah's wound healed, but he remained at Violet's homestead. He fixed her leaking roof, mended fences, and broke the wild Mustang she'd never managed to tame. He spoke little, but Violet found herself watching him, the careful precision of his movements, the unexpected gentleness with which he handled injured animals, the vigilance that never fully left his eyes. For his part, Isaiah found himself lingering for reasons beyond gratitude. Violet Allister was unlike any woman he'd encountered in his hard, traveled years. She carried no pretense, asked for no softening of his edges. Her hands, capable of such tenderness when treating the sick, were equally adept at chopping wood or shooting the rattlesnake that had threatened her chicken coop. One evening, as thunderclouds gathered on the horizon, Isaiah found Violet struggling to secure the barn doors against the coming storm. "Let me," he said, taking the rope from her hands. Their fingers brushed and something electric passed between them. Violet stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they stood. "I've managed on my own before," she said, her voice catching slightly. Isaiah secured the doors with practiced efficiency. "Doesn't mean you should have to." The rain began to fall as they raced back to the house, arriving on the porch breathless and damp. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Violet's face, her clear blue eyes, the freckles across her nose, the strand of auburn hair plastered to her cheek. Without thinking, Isaiah reached out to brush it away. "You could stay," Violet said suddenly. "Not just until you're healed, you could stay." Isaiah's hand froze against her cheek. "People would talk. People already talk. I'm not the kind of man who settles, Miss Allister. And I'm not asking for false promises, Mr. Fletcher." Another flash of lightning, another crack of thunder. Isaiah's resolve wavered like a flame in the storm. He'd spent years hardening himself against attachment, against vulnerability. But Violet Allister had slipped past his defenses with nothing more than honest eyes and unflinching care. "The only way to silence the talk would be marriage," he said finally, his voice rough. "And I doubt you'd want to tie yourself to a man like me." Violet looked at him steadily. "Ask me properly and we'll see." 3 days later, Isaiah Fletcher and Violet Allister stood before the minister in Winnetka's small church. The ceremony was brief, attended only by Martha Kingsley and the reluctant Sheriff Dawson as witnesses. Word had spread quickly through town, and by afternoon, every porch and saloon buzzed with the scandalous news. "She's thrown herself away on that killer," declared Abigail Thornton, wife of the banker. A refined young woman like Violet Allister, marrying a man who's probably got blood on every dollar to his name. "Heard he forced her into it," muttered Gerald Pike at the Rusty Nail Saloon. "Threatened her, most like. She'll be widowed or worse before winter," predicted the blacksmith's wife. Men like Fletcher don't change their ways. The whispers followed Violet as she walked through town the following week, head held high despite the stares and sudden silences that greeted her entrance to the general store or post office. Some old friends crossed the street to avoid speaking to her. Others made thinly veiled remarks about women with poor judgment. "Let them talk," Isaiah said when he found her weeping one evening after the butcher had refused to serve her. "Words can't hurt us." "It's not the words," Violet replied, wiping her eyes. "It's the hearts behind them. These people have known me my whole life." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Then I should leave. You can claim I abandoned you, get an annulment." "Is that what you want?" "What I want," he said slowly, "is to be worthy of what you've given me, but I don't know if that's possible." Violet reached for his hand, feeling the calluses and scars that mapped a life she could barely imagine. "Then be worthy going forward. That's all any of us can do." That night, husband and wife truly became one for the first time. Isaiah's touch, so careful and restrained in all their previous interactions, revealed a depth of tenderness that surprised them both. Violet discovered the language of his body, the stories told in every scar, the vulnerability behind his fierceness. For Isaiah, it was a surrender more complete than any he'd known. a trust more frightening than facing any gun. Summer faded into autumn, and the gossip in Winnetka gradually shifted to other matters: the coming railroad expansion, the drought affecting crops, the new school teachers' unconventional methods. Isaiah kept largely to himself and to their homestead, expanding the barn and increasing their livestock with shrewd trades. If he noticed the sideways glances or heard the murmurs when he rode into town for supplies, he gave no indication. Violet, however, felt the continued sting of the town's judgment. Women who had once welcomed her into their homes now limited their interactions to curt nods. The invitations to social gatherings stopped entirely. Even at church, a space opened around them in the pews, as though Isaiah's reputation might be contagious. "I never realized how much I valued their good opinion until I lost it," Violet confessed to Isaiah as they rode home from services one Sunday. Isaiah studied his wife's profile, the proud tilt of her chin at odds with the hurt in her eyes. "Do you regret it, marrying me?" Violet turned to him, surprised by the vulnerability in his question. "No," she said firmly. "I regret their smallness, not my choice." As winter approached, Isaiah's nightmares grew more frequent. Violet would wake to find him sitting rigid at the edge of the bed, his breathing ragged, eyes focused on ghosts only he could see. She learned not to touch him in those moments, but to speak softly until awareness returned to his gaze. "Tell me," she urged one night, after a particularly bad episode had left him trembling. Isaiah stared into the darkness. "Some things are better left buried. Not if they're digging themselves out every night." He was silent for so long that Violet thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice stripped of emotion, he began to speak of his time with the Pinkertons, the men he'd hunted, the methods that had become increasingly brutal as his reputation for results grew. "The last job," he said finally, "went wrong. There was a family, a woman and 2 children. They weren't supposed to be there." His hands clenched into fists. "My partner said no witnesses, said they'd seen our faces." Violet felt cold dread pool in her stomach. "What happened? I killed him. My partner put a bullet in him before he could harm them." Isaiah's voice was hollow. "But his brother was high in the Pinkerton ranks. Put a price on my head that had every bounty hunter and lawman from Missouri to California looking for me. That's why you were shot when I found you." Isaiah nodded. "Ran into some old acquaintances in Cheyenne. They'd heard about the reward." Violet reached for his hand in the darkness. "You did the right thing saving that family, maybe, but it doesn't wash away what came before." He turned to her, his face half hidden in shadow. "You deserve better than a man with blood on his hands, Violet." "Perhaps," she agreed softly. "But I chose you, and I'll keep choosing you." Winter descended on Winnetka with brutal force that year. Blizzards isolated the town for weeks at a time, and when supplies ran low, it was Isaiah who organized hunting parties to bring in game, teaching survival techniques he'd learned during his years on the move. Though many men still regarded him with suspicion, they couldn't deny his skill or his willingness to share it. When little Tommy Wilson got lost in a sudden snowstorm, it was Isaiah who tracked him for miles, finding the boy huddled beneath a fallen tree, nearly frozen. He carried Tommy back to town, refusing any thanks from the astonished parents. "Your husband," Martha Kingsley told Violet privately, "might not be what we thought." Violet smiled. "He's exactly what I thought." By spring, the open hostility toward Isaiah had mellowed to cautious acceptance. Men nodded to him at the general store. Women no longer hurried their children across the street when he passed. But true welcome remained elusive, and Violet knew that many still whispered about their marriage. In April, Violet confirmed what she had suspected for weeks: she was with child. Isaiah's reaction to the news revealed yet another layer to the complex man she'd married. His typical reserve cracked entirely, giving way to a joy so naked it brought tears to Violet's eyes. "A family," he said, holding her close. "I never thought." "You never thought you'd deserve one," Violet finished for him. "You were wrong." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer, with Violet's belly growing round and Isaiah's protective instincts sharpening to an almost comical degree. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavier than a teacup, and he spent hours building a cradle from the finest wood he could obtain. The first real change in the town's attitude came in July, when Isaiah stepped in to help after the Coleman farm was raided by cattle rustlers. He tracked the thieves to their hideout and, working with a reluctant Sheriff Dawson, recovered not only the Coleman's cattle but livestock stolen from 3 other ranches as well. "Man's got a gift for tracking," Sheriff Dawson admitted grudgingly to the assembled townspeople. "We'd have lost the whole herd without Fletcher's help." More opportunities followed for Isaiah to prove his worth. When a dispute over water rights threatened to erupt into violence between 2 neighboring ranches, Isaiah negotiated a compromise that left both parties satisfied. When young women reported being followed by a mysterious rider on the roads outside town, Isaiah took to patrolling at night until the culprit, a drifter with unsavory intentions, was caught and turned over to the sheriff. Still, acceptance was not the same as friendship, and Violet felt the absence of true community as her time grew near. The traditional gathering of women to help a new mother was organized reluctantly, with many declining the invitation Martha sent out on Violet's behalf. "It doesn't matter," Violet told Isaiah, though her eyes betrayed her hurt. "We'll manage just fine on our own." Isaiah watched his wife prepare for their child with determined cheer, and something hardened within him. That night, he rode into town alone, heading for the Rusty Nail Saloon where most of Winnebago's men gathered in the evenings. A hush fell over the room as he entered the first time he'd set foot in the establishment since arriving in town. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying to every corner. "I'll keep this brief. My wife is bringing new life into this world soon, and she's done it without the support women usually count on." His eyes swept the room. "I understand your caution regarding me. I've earned it. But Violet hasn't. She was born and raised among you, cared for your sick, mourned your dead." He placed his hands flat on the bar. "I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking you to remind your wives, your sisters, your mothers who Violet Allister was before she became Violet Fletcher. She deserves better than cold shoulders from people who once called her friend." The saloon remained silent as Isaiah turned to leave. Just before he reached the door, Samuel Thompson, the elderly owner of the general store, spoke up. "Fletcher." Isaiah paused. "Tell your wife Martha isn't the only one bringing birthing gifts tomorrow. My Eliza will be there too." The old man's words broke the dam. Other voices joined in, hesitant at first, then with growing conviction. By the time Isaiah left the saloon, he carried with him the promise of support that Violet had silently yearned for. The next day, 17 women arrived at their homestead, arms laden with handmade blankets, preserves, baby clothes, and advice. Violet's tears of surprise and gratitude were matched by the genuine warmth with which most of the women embraced her. If some remained stiff and formal, it was still more than she had dared to hope for. "What did you say to them?" Violet asked Isaiah that night, surrounded by the community's gifts. "Just the truth," he replied, "that you're worth more than my reputation." Their son was born on a clear September night in 1878, a healthy boy with his mother's blue eyes and his father's strong features. They named him Samuel, after Violet's father. "He's perfect," Isaiah whispered, holding his son with hands that trembled slightly. "And so small." "He'll grow," Violet assured him, watching her husband's face, the awe, the love, the lingering disbelief that such happiness could be his. The birth of Samuel Fletcher seemed to mark a turning point in the town's relationship with Isaiah. Men who had previously kept their distance now stopped to inquire after the baby. Women who visited cooed over Samuel and gradually included Isaiah in their conversations. If perfect acceptance remained elusive, the open hostility of their early days had largely disappeared. Life settled into a rhythm of hard work and quiet joy. Isaiah expanded their ranch operations, breeding horses that quickly gained a reputation for quality. Violet, once Samuel was weaned, resumed her nursing duties in the community. Their home became a place where travelers could count on a hot meal and fair treatment, regardless of background. Isaiah still carried shadows nights when his past returned to haunt him, days when the weight of his former deeds pressed heavily. But these episodes grew less frequent as Samuel's first steps, first words, and growing personality filled their lives with new purpose. The Great Fire of 1880 began in the early hours of a June morning, when most of Winnetka still slept. A lantern overturned in the new hotel, recently constructed to accommodate the increased traffic from the railroad, sent flames racing through the wooden structure. By the time the first alarm was raised, the hotel was fully engulfed, and the fire was spreading to neighboring buildings. Isaiah and Violet woke to the sound of the church bell ringing frantically. The orange glow visible even from their homestead told them all they needed to know. Leaving 4-year-old Samuel with Martha Kingsley, who lived nearby, they rode hard for town. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Men formed bucket brigades from the town's well to the burning buildings, but the water seemed to evaporate before it could do any good. Women gathered children and valuables, moving toward the outskirts where the meadow provided safety. The air filled with shouts, cries, and the terrible roar of the consuming flames. Sheriff Dawson, his face blackened with soot, spotted Isaiah and called him over. "Hotel's gone," he shouted over the noise. "General store and bank are next if we can't contain it. Most folks are accounted for, but the Thorntons, what about them?" Violet asked, her heart sinking. Abigail Thornton, the banker's wife, had been one of the most vocal critics of her marriage to Isaiah. "Their rooms are above the bank," the sheriff explained grimly. "Thornton got out, but Abigail and their daughter are still inside. Stairs collapsed before anyone could reach them." Without hesitation, Isaiah turned toward the bank building where flames were already licking at the lower windows. "Isaiah, no." Violet grabbed his arm. "The structure could collapse any minute." "There's another way in," he said, his eyes scanning the building. "Service ladder on the back wall leads to the upper floor. I noticed it when we opened our account." "I'm coming with you," Violet insisted. Isaiah's refusal was immediate. "Absolutely not. These people need your medical skills out here." He cupped her face in his hands. "Trust me to come back to you." Before she could argue further, he was gone, running toward the burning building with the sheriff and 2 other men following. Violet turned her attention to the injured, setting up a makeshift treatment area in the church, which stood far enough from the flames to be safe. As she worked cleaning burns, binding cuts, treating smoke inhalation, her thoughts remained with her husband. Isaiah found the ladder where he remembered, though flames had already begun to char its lower rungs. The heat was unbearable, searing his lungs with each breath, but he climbed steadily, the sheriff's shouts fading behind him. At the top, a small window led into what appeared to be a storage room, now filled with smoke. "Mrs. Thornton," he called, pulling his bandana over his nose and mouth. "Caroline, can you hear me?" A faint cry answered from somewhere ahead. Isaiah dropped to his hands and knees, where the air was marginally clearer, and crawled toward the sound. The floor beneath him groaned ominously. He found them in what must have been the Thorntons' bedroom, Abigail unconscious on the floor, her 12-year-old daughter Caroline huddled beside her, eyes wide with terror. "Mr. Fletcher," the girl gasped. "I'm going to get you out," Isaiah promised, checking Abigail's pulse. "Still alive, but barely breathing." "Can you walk?" Caroline nodded shakily. "Good girl. I need you to follow right behind me while I carry your mother. We have to move quickly." Isaiah lifted Abigail, surprised by how light she felt in his arms. The smoke was thickening, and he could hear the roar of flames growing closer. "Stay low," he instructed Caroline, "and hold onto my belt." They made their way back through the apartment, Isaiah navigating by memory and instinct more than sight. Twice they had to change course as sections of ceiling collapsed ahead of them. Finally, they reached the storage room, only to find the window engulfed in flames. "We're trapped," Caroline whispered, her voice breaking. Isaiah glanced around the small room, mind racing. "Not yet, we're not." Setting Abigail down gently, he grabbed a heavy ledger from a nearby shelf and smashed it through another window he'd spotted smaller, but overlooking the roof of the adjacent building, which wasn't yet burning. "This is our way out," he told Caroline. "I'm going through first, and you'll hand your mother to me. Then you'll jump and I'll catch you. Understand?" The girl nodded bravely. Isaiah broke away the remaining glass and squeezed through the opening. The drop to the neighboring roof was about 6 feet, manageable but precarious. Once he'd secured his footing, he reached back up. Now, with strength born of desperation, Caroline helped push her mother through the window into Isaiah's waiting arms. He lowered Abigail carefully to the roof, then turned back for the girl. "Jump," he called, arms outstretched. Caroline hesitated only a moment before launching herself through the opening. Isaiah caught her, staggering slightly but maintaining his balance. "Well done," he told her, as tears of relief streamed down her soot-stained face. "Now we need to get down from here." The descent from the roof proved almost as challenging as the rescue itself. Isaiah managed to lower Abigail to men waiting below, then helped Caroline down before jumping himself. By the time his feet hit solid ground, his lungs felt as though they were lined with glass, and burns marked his hands and forearms. But they were alive, all 3 of them. The sight that greeted Violet when Isaiah emerged from the smoke carrying Abigail Thornton, with Caroline clutching his hand, would remain etched in her memory forever. The crowd that had gathered fell silent, then erupted in cheers and shouts of amazement. Mr. Thornton pushed through to reach his family, his face transforming from despair to disbelieving joy as he embraced his daughter and knelt beside his unconscious wife. Violet rushed to Isaiah, who had collapsed to his knees once Abigail was safely delivered to the doctor. "You impossible, brave, foolish man," she whispered, checking him for serious injuries. "Promised I'd come back," he managed between coughs. The fire raged for hours more, ultimately destroying a third of Winnetka's buildings before a change in wind direction, and the exhaustive efforts of the townspeople brought it under control. The hotel, bank, general store, and several homes were lost, but remarkably, thanks to swift evacuations and Isaiah's daring rescue, no lives were claimed in the days that followed. As the town began the daunting task of rebuilding, Isaiah Fletcher found himself viewed through entirely new eyes. People who had once crossed the street to avoid him now stopped to shake his hand or clap him on the shoulder. Women who had snubbed Violet now invited her to their homes for tea. Most remarkable was the transformation in Abigail Thornton. Once she recovered from smoke inhalation, She became Isaiah's most vocal champion, recounting the rescue to anyone who would listen. "He risked his life for us," she told the assembled women at a quilting bee. "A man the likes of which I've misjudged terribly all these years." When plans were drawn up for rebuilding, Isaiah's opinion was sought on matters of construction and safety. When disputes arose over property lines or resources, he was called upon as a mediator. The very qualities that had made him feared his directness, his unflinching honesty, his capacity for decisive action now made him valued. "How does it feel?" Violet asked him one evening as they sat on their porch watching Samuel play with the puppy Isaiah had brought home for his 5th birthday. To be the town hero instead of its villain, Isaiah considered her question. "Strange," he admitted. "I'm not sure I deserve either label." "Perhaps none of us are only one thing," Violet suggested. "Hero or villain, saint or sinner. You've always been just good," Isaiah said, taking her hand. Violet laughed. "You didn't know me when I was 16 and stole Mrs. Kingsley's prize roses for a bouquet." "Shocking criminal behavior," Isaiah teased, pulling her closer. "My point is," Violet continued, "people are complex. The town was wrong to judge you solely on rumors of your past. And maybe they're just as wrong to elevate you now based on one brave act." Isaiah studied his wife's face in the fading light. "You're the wisest person I've ever known, Violet Fletcher. And don't you forget it," she replied, kissing him softly. The summer of 1880 brought not only rebuilding but renewal to Winnetka. The new hotel rose larger and grander than before. The bank reopened with improved security measures designed partly on Isaiah's recommendations. The general store expanded to include goods previously available only in larger towns. For the Fletchers, it brought another blessing: the news that Violet was expecting their 2nd child. This pregnancy was celebrated openly by the community, with none of the reservation that had marked Samuel's arrival. "Times change," Martha Kingsley observed as she helped Violet prepare for the baby. "People change too when given reason." "Not all people," Violet replied, thinking of her husband. "Some just need the space to be who they truly are." Isaiah Fletcher had indeed changed little in his essential nature. He remained a man of few words, with an intensity that could still intimidate those who didn't know him well. But he no longer carried his past as a weapon against the present. The nightmares that had once plagued him came rarely now, replaced by dreams of futures he'd never dared imagine. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born in February 1881, a winter baby with her father's dark hair and serious expression. Samuel, now an important 5.5-year-old, took to his role as big brother with solemn responsibility, checking on his baby first thing every morning and last thing every night. "She's so tiny," he told Isaiah one evening as they watched Violet nursing the infant. "Was I that tiny?" "Even tinier," Isaiah assured him, "but you grew strong." "Will she ride horses with us when she's bigger, if she wants to?" Samuel considered this. "I hope she wants to. It's the best thing in the world except for maybe your stories." Isaiah's stories had become legendary not just with his son, but with many of Winnetka's children. On Saturday afternoons, they would gather on the Fletcher's porch to hear tales of distant places and wild adventures, carefully edited versions of Isaiah's travels, with the darker elements removed and moral lessons subtly woven in. "Mr. Fletcher," piped up little Emma Wilson during one such gathering, "my papa says you once fought a bear with just a knife. Is that true?" Isaiah's eyes twinkled. "Your papa might be confusing me with Daniel Boone." "But you did fight bad men," persisted another child, "and save people." Isaiah glanced at Violet, who was rocking Elizabeth nearby. "The most important battles," he told the children, "are the ones we fight inside ourselves, To be brave when we're scared, to be kind when we're angry, to do right when doing wrong seems easier. Is that how you knew to save Mrs. Thornton and Caroline from the fire? Emma asked. Because you won those inside battles. I knew because your parents, all of you, would have done the same for my family, Isaiah answered simply. That's what community means. The children nodded, absorbing his words with the unquestioning faith of the young. To them, Isaiah Fletcher had never been anything but the strong, quiet man who told the best stories, fixed broken things, and had once walked through fire to save their neighbors. As Winnetka prospered through the early 1880s, so did the Fletcher Ranch. Isaiah's gift with horses attracted buyers from as far as Denver and Salt Lake City. Violet's nursing practice expanded to include midwifery, bringing her both personal fulfillment and additional income. They added rooms to their house, hired hands for the ranch, and set aside money for their children's education. In 1883, when the position of sheriff unexpectedly opened after Dawson retired due to poor health, the town council approached Isaiah. "We need someone with courage and judgment," explained Mayor Thompson. "Someone who can maintain order without creating enemies. The council voted unanimously to offer you the position." Isaiah was stunned. "There must be men better suited, men without my history." "Perhaps," the mayor acknowledged, "but none with your particular combination of skills and character. You've earned this town's trust, Fletcher. More importantly, you've earned its respect." After discussing it with Violet, Isaiah accepted the position. The ceremony where he pinned on the sheriff's badge was attended by virtually the entire town, a far cry from the sparse gathering that had witnessed his wedding 6 years earlier. "I never thought I'd see the day," Violet whispered, watching her husband shake hands with the councilmen. Samuel stood proudly at his father's side, while 3-year-old Elizabeth bounced impatiently in Martha's arms. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Martha replied, "and sometimes so do people." Sheriff Fletcher proved as effective as the council had hoped. His reputation alone deterred many troublemakers from lingering in Winnetka. Those who did cause problems found him fair but unyielding, more likely to offer a chance at redemption than hasty punishment, but equally capable of decisive action when necessary. The greatest test of his leadership came in the summer of 1885, when a dispute over cattle access to the Clearwater River threatened to erupt into armed conflict between Winnetka's ranchers and a powerful cattlemen's association from the neighboring county. "They've hired guns," Isaiah informed the town council grimly. "Professional men, not just cowboys looking for extra pay." "Then we should do the same," suggested one councilman. "Fight fire with fire." Isaiah shook his head. "That path leads to bloodshed on both sides. There are better ways to resolve this." Instead of meeting force with force, Isaiah rode alone to the association's headquarters, requesting a direct meeting with its leader, William Hargrove. His reputation preceded him, not the old rumors of ruthlessness, but his newer standing as a man of integrity and courage. "Fletcher," Hargrove acknowledged when Isaiah was shown into his office. "Heard you were handling things in Winnetka these days. Quite a change from your Pinkerton work." "Times change," Isaiah replied evenly. "And wise men change with them." Over the next 3 hours, Isaiah and Hargrove hammered out an agreement that would share water rights fairly while respecting property boundaries. Isaiah offered compromises where they made sense, stood firm where they didn't, and never once resorted to threats or intimidation. "You could have come in here guns blazing," Hargrove observed as they concluded their negotiations. "That's what the old Fletcher would have done." "The old Fletcher didn't have as much to lose," Isaiah answered honestly. "Or as much to protect. The peaceful resolution of the water dispute cemented Isaiah's reputation beyond Winnetka's borders. Neighboring towns sought his advice on similar conflicts. The territorial governor consulted him on matters of law enforcement. There was even talk of a future in politics, though Isaiah dismissed such notions with characteristic bluntness. "I'm a simple man with a complicated past," he told Violet when she mentioned the rumors of political ambitions others harbored for him. "This badge is responsibility enough." "You're hardly simple," Violet countered, smiling. "But I understand. Our life here is more than enough for me, too." Their life had indeed grown rich beyond anything either could have imagined that day when Violet found a wounded stranger at her barn. Samuel, now 12, showed his father's aptitude for tracking and riding, combined with his mother's compassion and quick mind. Elizabeth at 7 was fearless and determined, with a gift for drawing that had the schoolteacher predicting an artistic future. And 2-year-old James, their unexpected blessing, was still too young to reveal his particular talents, though his infectious laugh and boundless energy kept the household in constant motion. In the spring of 1889, as Winnetka prepared for its annual Founders' Day celebration, Mayor Thompson announced his plan for a special tribute. "We're unveiling a memorial plaque," he told Isaiah and Violet when he invited them to his home, "commemorating the Great Fire and those who distinguished themselves in fighting it." "That's a fine idea," Violet said sincerely. "So many people showed tremendous courage that day." "Indeed," the mayor agreed, "but one name will feature prominently: your husband's." Isaiah shifted uncomfortably. "That's not necessary, Thomas. I did what anyone would have done." "But it wasn't anyone who did it," the mayor insisted. "It was you, Isaiah, a man this town had judged harshly and wrongly." He leaned forward. "The plaque isn't just about the fire, it's about redemption. It's about second chances and seeing beyond first impressions." The unveiling ceremony took place on a perfect June day, exactly 9 years after the fire. The entire population of Winnetka gathered in the newly completed town square, where the bronze plaque was mounted on a stone pillar. Mayor Thompson's speech recounted the fire's devastation and the town's remarkable recovery. He acknowledged every person who had contributed to fighting the flames and rebuilding afterward. But as he neared the conclusion, his voice took on a more personal tone. "We gather today not just to remember an event, but to celebrate the spirit that defines our community. 9 years ago, many of us, myself included, thought we knew Isaiah Fletcher based on rumors and speculation. We judged his character from a distance and found it wanting." The mayor's gaze swept across the assembled crowd. Then came the fire, and with it, truth. When Isaiah Fletcher carried Abigail and Caroline Thornton from that burning building, he didn't just save 2 lives. He reminded us that courage and character reveal themselves in actions, not reputations. From her place beside Isaiah, Violet could feel the slight tension in his body. Her husband had never grown comfortable with public praise. She squeezed his hand, and he returned the pressure, drawing strength from her presence as he had countless times before. "The plaque we unveil today," the mayor continued, "bears the names of all who fought the Great Fire, but it also carries a message for future generations. In times of crisis, look not to a person's past but to their present heart. True character reveals itself when flames are highest." The crowd applauded as the cloth covering was removed, revealing the gleaming bronze plaque with its list of names and the mayor's carefully crafted message. Isaiah stood quietly, acknowledging the honor with a slight nod, while Samuel, Elizabeth, and little James, held in Violet's arms, watched with various degrees of understanding. The formal ceremony gave way to Winnetka's Founders' Day festivities, a barbecue, music, games for the children, and dancing on the newly constructed pavilion. As evening approached, Isaiah found himself standing slightly apart, watching Violet teach Elizabeth a dancing step while Samuel supervised James's attempts to catch fireflies. "Quite a family you've built, Fletcher," observed Sheriff Dawson, who had returned for the celebration. The older man's hair had turned completely white, but his eyes remained sharp. "Never would have predicted it when I first clapped eyes on you." Isaiah smiled slightly. "Neither would I. You know what I remember most about that fire," Dawson continued. "Not the heat or the noise or even you carrying Abigail out. I remember the next morning when half the town was in ashes and you were already organizing work crews, dividing tasks, making sure everyone had shelter." He shook his head. "That's when I knew for certain Violet hadn't made a mistake in marrying you. She's always seen clearer than most," Isaiah acknowledged. "True enough, but she also took a chance when others wouldn't." Dawson clapped him on the shoulder. "Some of us were slow learners where you were concerned, Fletcher, but we got there eventually." As the former sheriff moved away to greet other old friends, Violet approached, slipping her arm through Isaiah's. "You look pensive," she observed. "Just remembering," he replied. "The day you found me, how close I came to riding past your farm entirely." "I'm glad you didn't." Violet rested her head against his shoulder. "Though I might have tracked you down anyway, I was quite determined once I set my mind on you." Isaiah laughed, the sound still rare enough to draw glances from nearby townspeople. "I believe you would have. Lucky for me you didn't have to." "Lucky for us both," Violet corrected. They stood together watching the celebration, their children playing, their neighbors dancing and laughing, the town that had once shunned them now the center of their world. The journey from that first meeting to this moment had not been easy or straight. There had been pain and misunderstanding, doubt and difficulty. But there had also been growth and forgiveness, joy and love beyond measure. "Dance with me," Violet said suddenly, tugging Isaiah toward the pavilion where couples were gathering for a waltz. "You know I have 2 left feet," he protested mildly. "And I have the patience to guide them," she countered. "Come, Sheriff Fletcher, show these good people you're not completely intimidating." Unable to refuse her anything, Isaiah allowed himself to be led to the dance floor. As the music began and he took Violet in his arms, he caught sight of Abigail Thornton watching them with a smile, the woman whose life he'd saved, who had once led the chorus of disapproval against his marriage. "What are you thinking?" Violet asked, noting the direction of his gaze. "That life takes unexpected turns," Isaiah replied, "and that I'm grateful for everyone that led me here." The music swelled around them, and as they moved together under the star-filled Wyoming sky, Isaiah Fletcher, once feared, now respected. Once alone, now surrounded by love, felt the final pieces of his past settle into place, not forgotten but reconciled with the man he had become. The harsh cowboy was still there, in the watchfulness that never quite left his eyes and the readiness that kept his family safe. But alongside him existed the husband, father, and sheriff who had found his place in a community that had learned to see beyond first judgments. And Violet, dancing in the arms of the man the town had once laughed at her for marrying, knew that some journeys were worth every step, no matter how difficult the path. Their story begun in blood and suspicion, transformed through courage and constancy, had become not just their own private triumph, but a testament to the possibility of second chances. As the last notes of the waltz faded, Isaiah bent to kiss his wife beneath the glow of lanterns and stars, no longer mindful of watching eyes or wagging tongues. They had traveled too far together to be troubled by such things now. "I love you, Violet Fletcher," he said quietly, the words still a rare gift from a man more accustomed to showing his feelings through actions. "And I love you," she answered, her blue eyes reflecting all they had overcome and all that lay ahead. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." Around them, Winnetka continued its celebration. The town that had once criticized their union now witnessed to its enduring strength. And if some eyes grew damp watching the sheriff dance with his wife, remembering how close they had come to losing both in that terrible fire years ago, none would admit to such sentimentality, at least not until the next day, when the story would be told again, of the harsh cowboy and the woman who had seen beyond his rough exterior, to the heart capable of walking through flames to save others. Some legends, after all, were worth retelling, especially when they reminded a community of its capacity for misjudgment and redemption alike.